everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back, Gary. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been here, back with more news on a beautiful sunny day. We noted that this is our 63rd video that we've done together.
Wow.
And we all know the original intent of these videos was COVID hit. None of us knew much about it, and you were the subject matter expert. And we have picked your brain on 63 different occasions for quick education to keep us all in the loop and allow us to treat our COVID patients. Been very successful, I think. But I will add that we've been analyzing our videos, and we noticed that the last video we did, Gary, was over 20 minutes long. And when I go back to think about the purpose and the effectiveness of these videos, that's too long. And so I think we run the risk of losing our efficiency or quite literally losing our audience. So we are going to get back to basics and make a course correction and try to keep these shorter for you.
Right.
A little more quick tidbits that you feel free to view these on your phone without having to take up the whole meal. So that's the plan. So Gary, let's hit it. We're still talking about COVID.
Yep, still talking about COVID, and I must admit my brain feels a little picked over. but the first slide we're going to show you is just the center footprint that we always show you, and there's a little bit tick. There's a tick up at the very end. I put a little red arrow there. What does that mean? Not really sure. I looked at California data. California data shows that the unvaccinated and the very elderly are the ones that are being hospitalized.
Yeah.
And so I think that uptick might mean more testing in our centers, because there's still a lot of home testing going on, but it also may mean that unvaccinated people are still at risk of getting sick. And in California, if you're not vaccinated, it's like a 2.6 times rate of getting hospitalized and a 3 times the rate of not surviving COVID.
Compared to vaccinated people.
Compared to vaccinated. So yeah, those are big numbers. And so that's the first slide. And then we wanted to be kind of helpful, and I want to give you information that would be meaningful to you. So the next slide is showing you what variants have kind of showed up in California. And as you can see to the left, in the early part of the pandemic, there were many variants coming up. The Alpha is there, the Epsilon is there. And then you see that blue line, that represents a period when we had the Delta strain. But then there's the green line represents the Omicron strain, and there's been a lot of subvariants of Omicron, but we haven't seen a new major variant. And so I'm going to put just a red line there. I'm going to put a red arrow there showing you this period of time with the Omicron strain where we haven't had a new strain show up. And I think that's really good news. That kind of shows how the pandemic is becoming more endemic with one variant.
So Gary, is this a typical phase? Do all viruses act in this way, or is every virus a unique virus in terms of fewer and fewer variations?
Well, for novel viruses, in the 1918 pandemic, this was really what happened.
Okay.
In the SARS 2003, which didn't become a pandemic, we didn't have time to see other variants arise. So from the 1918 pandemic, this seems to be the course. Okay. Now the big question is, are we going to see another major variant? We may or may not, and if we do, it's likely not going to be more virulent.
So the real answer is we haven't had enough pandemics to know what's coming.
That's right.
Okay.
But I think this is really good news, that we're just seeing evolution of a single variant, and so far those second, third, and fourth generation subvariants of Omicron are not more dangerous. They're just more contagious.
Okay.
So a little bit in the news. I want to give you just some kind of pandemic news, and what does that mean? The first thing is, Governor Newsom announced that the COVID-19 state of emergency will end on February 28th. What does that mean? It means something for hospitals and nursing homes, but it doesn't mean anything for us ambulatory-wise. The second thing I want to share with you is that President Biden intends to end the COVID-19 national and public health emergency status of the pandemic on May 11th. And they're doing that ahead of time because there will be some changes. So right now, the government set up testing for free, vaccines have been free, Paxlovid, molnupiravir treatment's been free. That's going to go away. So on May 11th, there's going to be a shift where if people get sick or people need to be tested, it's going to come at a cost. And then the third question that I get a lot is, when's our next booster? And so far, by CDC recommendations, not yet. But there's been some chatter in academic centers about giving a second booster for patients who are severely immunosuppressed. So Gary, the real question is, if we're not going to do another booster yet, is the booster that we received effective?
Yeah.
And there was a really good study, a mathematical modeling study out of Mass General, and they showed that the vaccine has been holding up for more than a year. Okay. And so what we know about the booster is that the bivalent booster, in the first couple of months, it prevents infection, hospitalization, and death, over a couple of months, some of the immunity wanes a little bit, and then the infection rate can come up. So it doesn't protect you from infection a few months out, but it still protects you against hospitalization and death. And that's really kind of what we want. And so I think that's been really good news.
Really, it predicts maybe an annual booster potentially.
Yeah, we expect one next year, but the question is, do we need one before next year?
Okay.
And so far, not yet. And then I thought this was a very interesting study. This came out of JAMA. JAMA Internal Medicine showed that, and this is a study out of USC and Stanford, where they looked at excess mortality. So before the pandemic, we could understand how people would die from heart disease and cancer and similar other mortality drivers. And then with the pandemic, we saw excess mortality because of the pandemic. If you compare physicians to the general population had a 5-time higher mortality rate than physicians during the pandemic. And I found that really interesting because it says two things. One, despite being a medical person, a clinical medical person, we see a lot more sick people. We're getting exposed to the virus more, but we have 1/5 of the mortality of those in the general population, which means that PPE works, and also we're probably a much more vaccinated community.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good information, and it's good to know that despite having more exposure to the virus, our chance of getting ill and our chance of having a bad outcome are much less.
And that really supports our move towards treating this as an endemic kind of thing and
Right.
kind of get on with it and feel more comfortable seeing these patients in the office as we would a flu patient or a strep throat patient.
Absolutely, I think it's become more normalized.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully that was some useful information for you. Let me just close by saying, again, we wanted to make a course correction, and that's going to come in two ways. We want to tighten these up and make them shorter. But we've had 63 lessons on COVID, and I think you're all well versed in COVID. And Gary, are you predicting any pandemics on the horizon? New pandemics?
I sure hope not.
No? New variants?
We've got through the monkeypox.
All right. So, barring that, I think that what we'd like to do, we believe this mode of communication can be very effective, and we'd like to branch out and use it in different ways. It could be interviews with new physicians, could be interviews with somebody who's got a new program, could just be announcements about the group. So we're thinking about these things, and we want your ideas too. So feel free to reach out to me or Lily, or in fact, what we're going to do is after this, you're going to get a second text that you can return with a suggestion that will go into our texting bank, and that'll get to us also. So appreciate your input, and thanks for listening and watching.
Thanks, Greg.